It's Kelly Ishmael here, and in this video I'm going to show you how I set up and created the silhouette cut file that I used on the heart page in my December daily album. To get started, I'm here in Photoshop and I'm going to go to File, New, and I'm going to create a document that is 11 inches wide by 8.25 inches tall, which is roughly the size of the outside of the page protector in the 8x10 album. So I'm going to go ahead and say create here. I'm going to use the command and apostrophe to have the grid on my page here. Next, I'm also going to come over here on the left side to the ruler. I'm going to drag it over to about 1/2 inch mark. I'm doing that so that I give myself just a visual placeholder for the holes that I plan to punch on this page later on. So this just gives me kind of a rough view of how much space I actually have to work with. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to drag one of the digital hearts onto my page. You could also recreate this project really easily using just the digital version of this heart, but I am using the digital version of the heart to help me create this template and this cut file that I'm going to use later on. Okay, so with this plastic heart, I'm going to go ahead and just fill it black because that's going to help. You'll see how that helps me a little bit later on in the process. So I'm just going to use Shift Delete on my keyboard and say fill black. So now I'm just working with a black heart that is the same size as the plastic heart. I'm going to actually turn off the background. I want a transparent background. I could have done this when I set up the document, but I just forgot. So there you go. Alright, so I'm going to drag this heart up here to the top left of my page. And then what I'm going to do is if I double click on this layer on the thumbnail here, it's going to pull up these different layer style options, and I'm going to click on the stroke option, and you want to make sure that you have your mouse on this stroke menu here, or this option here. Otherwise, if you're here, you'll be looking at something different and it'll click it on. So I'm going to turn that off because I don't want bevel and emboss. I just want stroke. So I'm going to make sure so I can see the options that are available for this stroke layer. So I've played around a little bit. For the project that I created a stroke or a border around the heart that is 20 pixels wide. You could actually go up to maybe 30, but I'm just sharing with you how I created the layout that I have. Hindsight, it might have been a little bit easier to go with a little bit bigger strokes, so you can play around with that, choose your own adventure there. But for this layout, I created this with a stroke size of 20 pixels. I'm using the center position, normal mode, the 100% opacity, and I'm using a medium to light gray color. It doesn't really matter. I just want it to have contrast against the black. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK here. Next, I'm going to do Command J on my keyboard 4 times so that I have a total of 5 hearts. So I'm just going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's going to be 4 versions of this same heart. And then I'm going to drag one of the hearts all the way over to the right and just making sure that it's in line with the first heart. Now, if I select all 5 hearts on this layers panel here, and then if I use this distribute tool, now it will distribute them evenly horizontally across the top of the page here. Now I'm going to zoom in just a little bit because I want to make sure that the hearts are touching, but that they're not overlapping too much. I don't want too much overlap. So I'm going to say Command apostrophe and take that grid off just to see and make sure where I'm at. And then I'm just going to pull this guy over just a little bit more. Like I said, I don't want them to overlap too much. And I might move this guy over just a little bit more. Just a little bit, and you can use your keys or your mouse, and then I'm going to grab all of these again and then redistribute them so that they're equally distributed again, and then just once again double checking to make sure that they're touching but not overlapping too much. Okay, so now I've got my first row of 5 hearts, and I can just select them all in the layers panel, right click and say merge layers. Now if I hit Command J on my keyboard again, I can duplicate this row of hearts. And what I want to do, I'm going to zoom in just a bit. What I want to do is drag them so that they are touching and that there's no gap here between the bottom row of hearts and this kind of center part of the second row. So I'm just going to, sometimes it's a little bit easier to use your keyboard. So I want to have them as close as I can to be touching, but there's no gaps. All right. Command 0 is an easy way to get back out to the full page size. I'm going to select both of these rows. I'm going to use this center. I want to make sure they're perfectly centered. And now I can once again go ahead and merge these layers. Once again, I'm going to do Command J, and then I'm going to drag this next set down and do the same thing. Once again, I want them to be touching with as little overlap as possible, but also no gaps. Okay, that looks good to me. At the end of the day, when it's all cut out, if there's some minor differences, it's not going to show up. So it's really not that big of a deal. Okay, so now I have all 4 rows of hearts, and I'm going to merge the layers once again. Next, I'm going to use W on my keyboard, and I'm going to select on the black. Now, you want to make sure you have the contiguous button unchecked so that you can select all the black parts of this template. And then I just through trial and error, I find that a sample size of 3 by 3 with a tolerance of 10, in this case, it gave me a really nice, clean selection. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to hit delete on my keyboard and then Command D to deselect, and now I have just an outline of the heart shapes. And then I am going to hit Shift Delete on my keyboard and fill this with black. And the reason that I'm doing that is because when you pull it into Silhouette, it's the high contrast makes it much easier to trace or for it to grab or see the edges of these types of graphics. So now that that's black, I can simply right click on my layer and I can say export as, and I want to export this as a PNG. You want to make sure that the transparency is checked, and then you can just export it to your desktop or wherever it's easy for you to find. So I can just go ahead and export that to my desktop, and I can just call this hearts border. Okay, so here is that PNG that I created in my Silhouette Studio software. I have a Silhouette Cameo 3, I believe, but this will work, I think, with any of the Cameo versions. Also, I have a new version, or the most recent version of the Silhouette Studio software, and one of the awesome things that it does is it automatically traces around the objects when you pull them in, so it kind of saves you a step, but I will go ahead and show you how to trace it if you're unfamiliar with that part of the process. But before we get there, let me tell you about my page setup. I have the cutting mat that is sized at 12.12, and I used a media size of 8.5 by 11 because that's the size of cardstock that I'm going to be cutting this out of. So that's the media size that I have. And then what I would do if I'm going to trace this is I'm going to select this little icon here. It looks a little bit like a butterfly. So I'm going to go ahead and select that and hit Select Trace Area. And then I'm just going to drag that across the entire image, the entire graphic that I have. And then I'm going to select Trace. And you can see in yellow here, this is what's going to be traced. Once the graphic has been traced, now I'm ready to send it to my Cameo. Okay, so here in the Send tab, I have the material. I have plain cardstock chosen, which works fine for the type of cardstock that I'm using, which is a Nina white cardstock. It's the 60-pound, not the heavier 80-pound cardstock. That works the best for me in my printer and for the silhouette. So that's what I'll be using there, using the cut and auto blade. These are the default options for this plain cardstock material, and that works really well for me and my silhouette. Sometimes you have to experiment a little bit. It can be kind of frustrating. It's a little bit of trial and error sometimes, but I've just found through lots of trial and error that this works well for me and my silhouette. And so next I'll hit send. I'll send this to my silhouette, and then I will meet you at my work table and I'll show you how I finished it up.
Okay, so here I am at my work table. I've got my silhouette cut out here that I created, and a couple of tips here for removing these things from the silhouette mat once you've got it all cut out. The first is it depends on the type of mat that you have. I am using the standard stickiness. I'm sure there's a more technical term for that. I find that works best for the types of projects that I work on. Even still though, whenever you have a brand new mat, a lot of times they can be really sticky and hard to get things off, especially this is kind of a fine, a fine little cutout piece. So a lot of times I'll just use like a face cloth, like a bathroom hand towel or something, and just kind of blot it over the mat to help kind of reduce some of the super stickiness. Okay, so that's one tip. The other tip is whenever I'm removing things from my mat, I find that if I turn the mat over and peel the mat away from the paper, it tends to, I have fewer problems with it tearing. It comes off a little bit easier. I can go really slowly this way, and the mat is not going to get bent. It'll retain its shape. So that way the paper doesn't tend to bend or get like a weird, like a bend in it, or have a weird like roll to it. So I'm just going to very, very carefully and slowly pull the mat away from the paper. And I'm just taking my time here. And it comes, I mean, it comes off fairly easily. Once again, this is a mat that has been very well loved, as you can tell. So it's not quite as sticky as it was when it was brand new, which helps. Okay, so I'm almost there. This is easier to do when I'm not doing it on camera. Okay, almost there. Here we go. Okay, I can set that aside now. Here's the main outside. And here are just a ton of cute white hearts for you if you want to use them down the road. Might be fun. Could probably stamp on those or do something really fun. But here is the heart border. And I just think it is so, so pretty. All right, now what I would want to do next is I want to attach the plastic heart to the cutout, this border. And to do that, there's a couple of ways that you can do it. What I found, I had a little trial and error. If you have a super fine tip glue pen like this, you can use something like this. That's a pretty fine tip. I've also got this one. This one is not quite as fine of a tip. You can use that, or if you have an even finer one, that would be better, because what I found is that, you know, the hearts are a little bit slippery, and it's just such a fine, it's just such a thin, fine area. Like I said, if hindsight being 2020, I could have made it a little bit thicker or made the stroke a little thicker, and I think it would have helped me a little bit, but whatever, live and learn. I'm happy how it turned out anyway. But what I ended up doing is squeezing a nice blob, for lack of a better word, on a piece of scrap paper. And then I used a really, really tiny fine brush, and I basically painted the glue around the outside. And then I attached the heart. And yes, it is as time consuming as you would imagine. So Yes, get ready to spend some time on this. But it's fine because I adore how it turned out so much. Oh, I think one of my hearts is fallen off here. Yeah, I'm going to have to come back and add a little more adhesive on this guy. So I'll add some more adhesive, but I absolutely love how this turned out, and I've decided that I'm going to use this page with the Christmas card that my daughter sent. She got married this summer, so it's a Christmas card with her and my son-in-law, which just gives me all the warm fuzzies. You can see here I left these 4 spaces blank because I knew I would put some type of a photo or something on that. So like, why not? Why waste 4 of these extremely cute hearts where you're not going to see them? So I'm going to attach this photo here. And then what I have done is I have just put some journaling on I think this was last year, maybe it was the year before last, but I just put it on a little tag. And I think what I'm going to do is just make this so that it kind of hides behind here so you can read the journaling that goes along with it. And then I'm also pairing it with a full-size 11 by 8.25 photo from their wedding, which I just love so much. I mean, it's totally not a Christmas story, but it kind of is a Christmas story. I love it, and it just makes me so happy seeing this giant photo of my daughter and my son-in-law at the wedding. I added another red heart just to give it a little bit of a repetition here. I've added the 13. This is going to be the story for Monday, December 13th. And so I've repeated the gold over here. I also added this phrase. It was one long, kind of slender phrase, but I decided to cut it up. Morgan Beale did a similar thing, and I just was like, thank you for giving me permission to cut that up. So that's what I did on this kind of white space of the photo. And then on my heart page, I've added K and A with the similar chipboard letters, once again, just to kind of tie the 2 pages together and add a little bit of a repeated element. And yeah, I'm just super happy how the page turned out. I didn't plan it, but I love how the colors in the hearts really work with the colors in the background of the photo. It just all came together really awesome. I'm super happy with how this turned out. Also, just wanted to remind you that anytime you're using a silhouette, especially if you're new to it, there's always a little bit of trial and error involved. So just hang in there and be patient. You will figure it out, I promise. And feel free to ask me any questions. Happy to help however I can. And if you decide to create a page like this, I would love for you to tag me on Instagram so I can see what you made. As always, thank you so much for watching and letting me share all of my stories and projects with you.